Hey folks, welcome to another one of my costuming cosplay tutorials. This time around I've been asked to cover my cosplay of 1939 Batman. This guy right here. So as you're probably already aware, Batman, when he made his debut in comics in 1939, over 80 years ago, looked very different than what we're used to now thanks to the movies and the comics and the merchandise and the culture around us where we see Batman all the time. Early on, Batman, as conceived by Bob Kane and Bill Finger, had a very different look. His cape looked more like stiff bat wings at times. He would turn in profile and the wings would seem to be more like a cape. When he would swing, those stiff wings would arch out behind him, almost looking like true stiff leather bat wings, as opposed to the cape we're familiar with now. It also had two tones. The inside seemed to be blue or purple, depending on the colorist, or the reprint, or the printing where you saw those early stories.
His early helmet, or cowl, also was very different, looking sometimes like the bat ears jutted out wildly from the sides. Their length would vary. Other times they'd seem pushed way back on the rear of the cowl when seen in profile.
So as always, let's start out talking about the costume I designed for this cosplay. Now I know this bat insignia on the chest doesn't quite conform to the original bat insignias in the 30s and 40s as seen in the comics, but I wanted to stylize it a bit, use an insignia that I personally liked. And basically this is a gray bodysuit, like the one I use for my 70s Batman cosplay.
Once again, I've added subtle bits of muscle shading here and there.
As you will note up close, how I did that was almost with small dots and a kind of gradation, kind of mimicking what you would see in early comic book printing. This is also what newspapers used to use with halftone photographs so they could effectively print photographs in newspapers, which are just a black and white medium.
The photographs had to be translated into a series of black and white dots. You'll notice again these costumes are printed overseas by such firms as Zentai Zone. And they have a bit of a sheen,
depending on how you're photographing them, how much light you have on them. But again, I designed this myself. Let's take a look at my design right now. How about that?
Again, not a lot of muscle shading. I just use a series of dots, some darker, some lighter, against the basic gray of the bodysuit, and then had it printed.
But like I said, you have to be careful with some of the sheen on these. They're kind of semi-shiny, semi-glossy. And again, very subtle muscle shading using dot patterns and gradations. Just like that. Now I know that early Batman, one of the things people really think about him and remember about him as far as being different from the later versions of the character was the fact that he had short purple gloves. Forget about the long dark gloves with the three protruding fins. This Batman just had basically workman's gloves, except they were purple, to kind of tie in with the sometimes purple interior of his cape, sometimes blue. I looked around a lot of different gloves, and I settled on these kind of workout gloves, which have raised knuckles, which is kind of weird. And you notice I added some purple styling because a full purple glove just didn't work well with this cosplay. And those worked really, really well. Of course, when I post pictures, a lot of folks will chastise me saying those aren't the right gloves. But again, it's your cosplay. It's your cosplay to customize based on appearance, based on effect, based on what you're comfortable in, based on what you can afford, and based on what you think just gets the idea across best. In that spirit of customization, I also went another way with an alternate pair of gloves. If I can get them on here. And you'll see in a moment.
And these are accessories I found easily and inexpensively online.
What I did. Something about this kind of conveyed the Dracula effect, early monster movies, the elongated nails, the elongated fingers, gives you kind of a monster movie look, a bat-like look, and these fins kind of call into mind the kind of fins Batman would have later in the 40s on his gloves, and then, of course, later on in the later comics of the 50s onwards. And this was a fairly successful look. I also added some stiff cardboard here to keep this portion from flapping and flopping around like that. So let's take a look at the costume with these particular gloves right now.
I really like the retro look of the gloves, adding to the retro feel of the costume. Of course, with those claws, those extended fingertips, it was a little hard to grab and hold on to things. Forget using your cell phone.
One thing I really wanted to point out with this particular costume was I was trying to get across too the feel of it's 1939, yeah, this guy's rich, Bruce Wayne, but what would you put together in that year as a crime fighter that had those same needs of movement, of stealth, the whole idea of trying to strike fear into criminals. So I wanted to go for kind of a stripped down look. This isn't a guy that's going to have gadgets and gizmos everywhere. It's going to kind of look a little tatty and a little homemade, because that's what it is. So anyway, let's talk about the belt. As you can probably guess, if you've seen my other cosplay tutorials, this all started with an interior military belt, very inexpensive on eBay or Amazon. You can adjust it to your size. You can leave room to either increase the size you need or decrease it. And around that, I use basically sheets of foam, later painted gold, of course, to create this kind of retro Art Deco belt. The buckle
is just more carved foam of different thicknesses.
Now there is a lid, there's like a peanut can lid there in the middle. I'm not sure what that came from. Even the little semicircle beneath, that is just more foam. You can see how that's super glued on there in the back. I really studied a lot of different Art Deco looks and designs to get this feel. Now, Batman early on, instead of having those thin little vials on his belt that he would keep lockpicks and things like that in, had much more quote-unquote realistic storage areas on the belt. So I wanted to kind of replicate that. These are simply plastic containers, little vials. Thick plastic containers cut in half, super glued. Of course, everything was painted gold of various shades. But a really nice retro look. All from cheap, inexpensive foam. Foam board you can buy at Joann's or Michael's. And a cheap military belt. I love those belts. You can build around them. Here I added a little hook Batman often carried a lariat or a rope on his belt. You'll see later I added a kind of retro ray gun. Not Ronald Reagan, not Alvino ray gun. Little joke for you fans of the 1960s Batman series there. Good citizen. But a little gun that you'll be seeing in a bit. All right, let's take a look at the belt and its manufacturer right now.
So here you can see my designs using just cardboard and Bristol board, building up the depth of the belt buckle. Already got the cut plastic vials in place. And just using simple foam sheets of various thicknesses, I just built it up from there. Here it is before the little accessories around it have been added. The little plastic cap, all painted with various shades of gold spray paint. It's comfortable to wear, although I wouldn't advise sitting down in these things. Come to think of it, I don't think I've ever sat down wearing this belt.
Now, even if you don't have a lot of cosplays, like me, I've really only got 6 or 7 or 8, you do find sometimes, especially if you're doing different versions of the same character, you do find you can swap and switch out a lot of your accessories. And in this case, I use my 70s Batman boots. These were found on eBay. Nice little pointed tops. Kind of long. The little pointed tip comes up right beneath your knee. Very simple. Pretty cheap, like $30 on eBay maybe. Easy to find, but it works with this cosplay. All right, you heard me mention how I made a custom kind of retro 30s ray gun for this Batman to use. This is simply a retro water pistol. I added some foam detailing here, some bat-like details, trying to keep the Art Deco look in mind, that kind of 20s, 30s design look, to have a nice period piece, period prop Batman could carry. I was also keeping in mind, of course, the famous 40s Batman serials where they would recycle science fiction props from Buck Rogers. You know, they always kind of had that same futuristic ray gun look. Let's look at some pictures of Batman with the gun.
So except for the foam accessories and parts I added to the gun, it's pretty sturdy being a one-piece plastic water gun. You especially have to be careful with it in storage, because the foam is easy to bend, easy to wrinkle. That also goes for the belt or any other accessories or parts made for these costumes out of foam.
And here is that futuristic ray gun hanging from the customized belt loop. It sits, of course, right at Batman's hip. It is easy to put on and take off. Isn't Velcro a wonderful thing? Yes, it is. There we go. There we go. I love all those shades of gold. Very retro. All right, let's talk about the outer mask for Batman. This is simply a fan-made Batwoman mask, I do believe. I think I found this on Etsy, and I modified it with some paper mache construction paper to elongate the ears, give it kind of that odd, lopsided, kind of wild look the early Batman had. Non-symmetrical, just a bit. The eyes, of course, I filled in just like with my 70s Batman, using a kind of white mesh. Find this is sometimes called buckram. Looks great once seen from the other side. And as you can see, I also added some Velcro. And in just a moment, I will show you how this Velcros onto the hood I use for the 1939 Batman mask. Okay, so here I am. I've donned the hood. And like in my other cosplays where I use this, this is just a black balaclava. Fairly cheap on eBay online. A lot of skiers use these. A lot of people just out in the cold use these. And I'm going to attach the mask to the Velcro on the balaclava and the inside of the outer face mask. Just press it in place. And there we go. And again, I like that kind of odd sort of 1930s, 1940s look. Little touches like keeping the little curls here on the mask. The odd ears, odd ear tips. Again, not exactly like the comics version, but gives you that kind of still getting there early feeling of the character. Very easy to see out of. Of course, the eye slits sit close to your own eyes. Good profile. Just a lot of fun. And again, all inexpensive stuff. I love how this also kind of reminds you of later versions like Batman the Animated Series, a few other things like that. A lot of fun. All right, let's talk about the cape. Like my Batman 1966 cape and my Batman 70s cape, I had this made by a local seamstress to my specifications. Very long cape. The interior I had made a shiny purple. The outer is a glossy black. And like my 70s Batman cape,
it simply attaches
with a series of snaps to keep it extremely snug. Good thing I've got my monitor here, because I don't have a mirror, and usually you've got to do this in a mirror. There we go. Nice and snug. Like some of my other capes, there's Velcro inside to keep the shoulders pinned to the bodysuit where it's needed. I, of course, had her put in some rigid rods in the side so you can do the famous uplifted bat wing like that. But a lot of fun. I like how the interior lighter color, the purple, will set off the body very nicely. It kind of frames the Batman costume when worn. All right, let's take a look at some pictures of the cape with the rest of the costume.
There's nothing better than a windy day for cosplay pictures. Yes, I know this belt is different. This was an early belt I used temporarily. Putting those rigid outer dowels in the cape to good use. Again, the inner cape color really frames the costume well.
And like I said, I had her design this with rigid interior dowels or rods to keep the cape nice and stiff on the edges when you unfurl the bat wings. Most of the scalloped wings, the scalloped edges, just go after the usual Batman scalloped cape end designs, nothing unusual there. Like some of my other capes, it's pretty heavy. It's a pretty heavy cape, but a lot of fun. And I like how this does give, once put together, the outer mask with the hood, a fairly cohesive look of a one-piece cowl, as it would be made in the 30s with someone with limited resources of the time. So there you go. Again, not a lot to this costume. I was trying to replicate the look of what could be made at the time period with the resources of the day. Kind of has that sort of
doing with what you've got look,
which I really love, because really the early Batman, just a guy saying, let me see what I got, and I'll put together a belt and a cape and a mask and be a nut and go out and fight crime on rooftops and things like that. So once again, thank you for joining me. Please look up and enjoy my other cosplay tutorials.
Let me know if there's anything I can help you with. Maybe you're making a similar costume or cosplay.
It's always great to ask the people that have done these things. It can help you avoid a lot of trouble, sometimes a lot of pitfalls, a lot of time and money wasted. There's nothing wrong with asking help of those who have come before. But I do appreciate your support, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.
Say, if you enjoy these tutorials, please hit that little button to the right and subscribe.